Excellent. Thank you so much, Jan, and thanks Best and Brightest Companies to Work For. Today, we're going to do something a little off the cuff. We actually have a guest speaker with us. I've got Isaac Mallory, who is a director here at HR Performance Solutions.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you.
And Isaac has some great commentary to add. And when I say commentary, I mean like comedy-tary.
Oh, we should set the bar lower for the event. So, yeah, we're really excited to be with you. Just as a way of introduction, our firm focuses in two areas, and Jan alluded to these. One of the spaces that we work with is performance management. So part of our objective is to, as an organization, is to help other organizations to have a successful performance management process. So we work with about 1,400 clients in that space. The other area that we focus in is compensation. We help organizations to create a salary structure and salary grades and create equity within their organizations. All of that helps them to stay competitive so that they can attract and retain the best talent. And so there's just a little more background about our firm and what we do. And some of that's going to come into play today as we share some of the best practices that are out there and as we talk about winning the war on talent. Now, this next slide that we're going to show you is perhaps the most important slide. There it is. That is a picture of my wonderful colleague, Jennifer Dickey. Jennifer?
Yeah, I know it says 92 on there. This is a very recent picture. I believe it was taken last week.
We took this picture last week. Right?
Yeah. So if you're out there and you have a similar picture that is sitting in your mother's wallet, that's where I found this picture, let me know. This is a great picture. But why is this great to go back in time?
Yeah, let's talk about that. We don't just put that picture up there because it's an awesome picture, even though it is a great picture, Jennifer. We put that picture up there is because things have changed in HR since this picture was taken, right? This was back in 1992. I did not have big hair like that, but at least I had some hair back then.
Exactly.
Yes, but a lot of things have changed since 1992. We want to talk about some of the most recent trends and how that will affect how that's affecting organizations.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. So as organizations, we all have employees and we all have expectations of our employees. So whether it be through workplace culture, leadership, or goals, we expect those employees to come to work each and every day and make a positive impact. Conversely, as an organization or as employees, they want something similar. They want us to support their needs. They want us to provide encouraging development and ensure that they're moving in the right direction. And they also want to be compensated accordingly. And that leads me to the opening question that you see on your screen today. How do you know if your employees are engaged in the things that matter most? We all know that companies with highly engaged employees, they outperform those companies with disengaged employees on all accounts. Think about profitability. Think about productivity. Think about decreased turnover. If they're engaged in the things that matter most and not just engaged, they're going to stay, right? They want to stay. They know that they now have a sense of purpose within your organization. So how do you know what your employees are engaged in at work? It's a really difficult question if you think about it, right? And throughout decades of working with various organizations, we experience a lot of similar situations. We've also experienced a lot of assumptions from countless executives, HR professionals, and even employees about the engagement of their teams. So presentations like the one that we're going to review today, they help leaders really move beyond assumptions and implement practices that will contribute to healthier workplaces with better results and engaged employees. So when you think about your top performers, think about how many choices they have when it comes to career opportunities, right? Let's take a look at some of these stats on your screen today. 35% of employees are so unsatisfied with their salary that they'll leave to get a pay increase. That's crazy. And it's crazy, too, how it impacts your organization. Those organizations with hourly employees that are looking to get maybe a 10 cent, maybe a 20 cent increase, they'll leave. They'll go to the organization down the street so that they can obtain this. In a study of over 1,000 workers, 31% reported having quit a job within their first 6 months. This has happened to me. This has happened to many organizations. You're in the recruiting stages, the interview stages. You think that you finally found that crystal ball. It's that right fit. And we onboard them. We train them. We invest all of these dollars into making sure that they're successful, to only find out that they leave 6 months later. What happened? Did they have that sense of purpose? And when you look at Gallup's real unemployment metric, which takes into account those who are unemployed, underemployed, or who have stopped seeking employment, that sits at 7.9%. So whether you take more into consideration when you're looking at Gallup, or you put more stock into the Labor Bureau, the implications are clear. Your employees, your top performers, they have choices. And knowing this really puts a lot of pressure on us and organizations to think differently and to compete, not only for external talent, but for our own our internal talent like we never have before. So today, let's talk about how to develop our top performers. Let's talk about how to identify who these performers are, and then let's get into how we can engage these performers. And in doing that, we want to start with goals. Remember goals? So why are goals important? You always want to start here. Only 50% of employees know what's expected of them at work, and that's from Gallup, which is alarming, right? Let's think back to that initial question that was on our screen before. How do you know if your employees are engaged in the things that matter most? And to answer that, think about yourself for a minute. Do you yourself know what matters most at work? If you're nodding your head yes, how do you know? Maybe because you have goals that identify what you're supposed to be engaged in. So what we know about employee engagement from leaders like Gallup is that the top driver of engagement, especially for millennials, is the opportunity to learn and grow. And providing goals really provides direction, it sets expectations, and it's going to help them to measure success. Like any good sports coach that's trying to build a successful program, in our work with clients, we start with the fundamentals that serve as a foundation on which all long-term strategies and tactics are built. And for employee engagement, the foundation is their goals. So a quick poll question. Let me know, how strong would you say your company's goal process is? Would you say that it's super strong? Meaning we're pretty amazing and each employee has goals and they're aligned to business goals and managers have regular check-ins. Would you say it's strong? We do a good job. We assign goals to the employees. Is it somewhat strong? Some employees have them, some do not. Or D, I'm sorry, what was that question? Maybe we definitely need to focus more on this. So let's go to that next slide and see where we are.
We see a wide range of results from this typically when we ask this question. So we'll be excited to see what's out there.
I'll give you just a minute.
Yeah.
We'll go to the results. Ooh, awesome. So if you're in that strong, we do a good job, you are doing amazing. Look at the super strong, about 15.4. Oh, it went down, 14.8. And then somewhat strong. Oh, and we have some people that actually answered, what was that question again?
We see that.
Yep, definitely. So why is this so important? And what goes into making sure that you have goals? And you not only have goals, but they're strong goals. What makes this important? With engaged employees performing 20% better and 87% less likely to leave. We need everybody involved in this process. And more specifically, we need managers and team leaders to become expert relationship builders, and they need to learn how to nourish and sustain those relationships over time. Because you can assign goals to employees. So say you start the beginning of the year and you're going to make sure that everybody has goals. One, you want to make sure they're good goals. Two, you want to make sure that your managers are involved in that process, because your employees will not be successful if, one, managers are leading and coaching employees to success, right? You need to have that. Without employee performance coaching, there can be no sustained engagement. Coaching is all about helping employees to become more effective and focused in their roles, right? That second part, we've got goals, we've assigned them to our employees. We need to get our managers involved in that coaching and development. But look back at your goals. Are they aligned to business outcomes? If not, let's get them to be there, because employees are looking for that sense of purpose, right? And making sure that your business goals are aligned and trickle down to employee goals will help fulfill that. It does your employee no good to establish goals just for the sake of checking a box. I remember starting a position as head of an HR department and meeting with one of our managers that was reporting up to me. It was an HR manager, and reviewing what goals were assigned to her. One of her goals was order office supplies, which was, great in terms of making sure that I had amazing pens, amazing pencils, and a super shiny red stapler. However, what is that going to do for that employee? How is that engaging that employee in the things that matter most, right? So you want to make sure that, one, you get your managers involved. You make sure that they have the skills needed so that they can coach and develop their employees on these goals, which is really hard to do. We know that, but it's our job to make sure that we're leading that charge. So in terms of goals, and making sure that they're assigned out, and making sure that they also align with business strategies, how do we monitor something like this, right? The report that you see on your screen today is a really good way to be able to monitor something like this. So on that left-hand side, you'll see strategy definitions. This was where you would list all of your business strategies or your business initiatives. Then if you go down that screen, you can really tell where everyone is in terms of goal alignment. That first column tells you number of goals linked to a strategy. So where we see develop 10 new strategic partnerships, if you move over to the right, it looks like we have 35 goals directly linked to that strategy. If you move over another column, it looks like we have 28 goals now started. We've got 5 in progress and 2 completed. So looking at this, we may be able to tell immediately at any point in time that we're falling behind, as there's a number of goals assigned to ensure the success of this strategy. However, only half of those goals have yet been started. So linking goals to strategy, it provides that sense of purpose. It's going to help you, again, engage your employees in those things that matter most. So we've identified the importance of employees having goals in strategic goal alignment, but how does employee performance really correlate with their engagement, right? If you look at this next slide, this is going to give us a couple of points of information. Let's look over to the right. That first graph demonstrates employee engagement as an isolated metric, right? So most organizations, if you're doing any sort of annual engagement survey, or you're ahead of the game and you're conducting pulse surveys, you have this information. Let's go over to the next graph, performance score by employee. We probably also have this information within our organizations, right? But probably within an isolated metric. What happens when you correlate all of that data? Well, to be able to do that and really to unlock the value of engagement data, you need to combine this type of information. This way you can connect employee engagement data to things your business cares about, such as performance and profitability. So let's look at the left-hand side of that screen, where that data is actually correlated. We can see immediately if there's something that stands out, if there's an outlier, if we have a top performer that could potentially be at risk. And quickly we can see Danielle Douglas. If we look at what's going on with Danielle, Danielle looks to be a high performer. Her performance level is at a 4.5 out of 5. But then if you go to the left and look at where her engagement levels are, she's at a 4 out of 12. Lots of things can come about when you're looking at this. Is Danielle not engaged in those things that matter most? Has she outgrown her position? Is there something going on with her manager, something going on with her team? Is she reviewing her compensation? Is pay becoming a distraction? So having access to this and being able to use data that you have internally will be able to communicate results like this so that you can better identify any red flags or any potential employees or top performers that may have an issue and potentially maybe wanting to leave the organization.
So I really like what Jennifer shares at this point with regards to the data. I think it's really compelling, and data is one of these areas where HR has a lot of opportunity for growth. And so one of the things that Jennifer's talking about here is collecting data from engagement surveys. And when you do that, you get certain information about engagement levels. And when you do performance reviews, you get certain information about performance levels. But then when you combine that information, you all of a sudden can have a brand new set of insights because you're looking at two different data sets. So one other thought on this slide, when you're thinking about engagement levels at your organization, it's good to think about the organization holistically. It's also really important that you narrow your search down and say, how's the engagement level of our top performers, like a Danielle Douglas? Because as you really focus on that, you're going to find that some of these key players at your organization may need a little bit of help staying engaged, and that's a great way to focus. All right, I'm going to share a couple of other things with you here. So we've talked a little bit about data, and there is still, this human component will always be vital. It's always going to be important that we as an organization, we as leaders in an organization, are thinking about the human component of things, and HR has always been fantastic at this. So there's research that shows that managers, about 44% of managers in the United States are nervous about giving honest and candid feedback to their employees.
Wait, managers struggle with giving feedback?
Can you believe that?
This is a weird concept.
Unbelievable,
yeah.
Right? And it's funny because I was talking with a capable, competent, brilliant HR person the other day, HR professional, and she had to have one of these critical conversations, and she's been doing this for 20 plus years, and said that her husband made her wear her bite splint at night because she was losing sleep over this hard conversation she was about to have. So now, and I can relate, right? And so I'm going to tell you a story. Actually, before I tell you the story, let me set the stage. So these managers, they do report losing sleep. They do report procrastinating these conversations. They get nervous and sweaty and avoid the employee, right? And they do that in part because they think that if they give honest and candid feedback, it's going to lead to a negative outcome. And we've all been on the receiving side of this, where someone gives us honest feedback and they do it in a harsh way, and it causes us to feel bad. And in the academic world, we translate that and say there's a decrease in engagement levels. And so we've all had that experience. I'm going to tell you a story about Jennifer. A number of years ago, I had to have one of these hard conversations with one of my employees, and I was nervous about it. I didn't really know how to go about it. And I happened to be talking with Jennifer about it, and Jennifer said, Isaac, this is how it goes. You say A, you say B, and you say C, and that's it. And so when I had this conversation with the employee, we said A, we said B, we said C, and that was it. And so because of an experienced and a thoughtful HR professional, I was able to have a totally different experience with my employee than it could have otherwise been. And so I want you to know that you may have managers out there who are capable, competent in different areas, but sometimes some of those managers will need a little help with the wordsmithing and the perspective. And HR can do a great job of providing that.
Yeah, and more than likely, if you're in HR, you know that managers will usually come to you when there's an issue with the employee. And the first question back to managers is, well, what conversations have you already had with the employee? More than likely, the answer was, well, I haven't talked to them yet. So that's when it's our role to really give them the tools that they need to have those conversations. So it's frustrating. We know because we expect them to be able to have these, but we need to be able to give them the tools sometimes, and that provides that confidence so that they can go back and have successful conversations.
Great, thanks. And I'm going to show you a little bit more research out of this. So some of the University of Michigan has a department called the Organization for Positive Scholarship, and they research this area. What they find is that managers, when they give honest and candid feedback, that same honest and candid feedback, but when they do it in a supportive way, that actually leads to an increase in engagement levels and resilience for those employees. And so even though it's the same candid feedback, it's given with a different tone. It's given with a little bit of different angle. And it has a totally different transformative result for that employee. So managers oftentimes will need a little bit of coaching in that.
You know, before we go to top performers, I just want to check in with Jan. Were there any questions on this section?
And you know, it looks like one actually came through on our chat. Roni asked, regarding the goals and engagement matrix, what happens when you don't have engagement scores by employee? Great question. So Roni does anonymous surveys, and she does that to get the honest feedback. That's a great question. Jennifer?
Yeah, I definitely recommend, I never want to recommend that organizations take that away. I think the anonymous survey, the once a year when you're asking probably more than 3 questions, you're getting good feedback, right? But what that does is it establishes a great benchmark, a great place to start. In order to get data like we reviewed on that one report, we also recommend having quarterly or monthly pulse surveys to where you're only asking one question. And that question, an example of that question would be, are you happy? And maybe they answer, either a yes or no, or I've seen it too where we recommended, one is a smiley face, one's just a normal face, and one's a sad face. If you only have one question, and it's a pulse survey, we recommend go ahead and correlate that to an actual employee. So the employee would actually be linked to their answer. And what we found, because you would think that they wouldn't answer any type of survey with any sort of feedback, but when it's one question like that and it's structured like that, they are more likely to answer it because it's formulated more like a social media, like a like or a not like sort of thing. So we have gotten really great results to where we can get that feedback, and then we can then correlate it to with engagement and performance management metrics.
Another great simple question to ask on some sort of pulse survey is, would you recommend this place, would you recommend that a friend of yours work at this organization? So the Net Promoter Score is another good option for that. Great question. Thanks for asking.
Awesome.
All right. Let's talk about top performers for just a moment. And anytime you're going to talk about top performers, of course, the natural segue is with NASCAR. So why don't we, Jennifer, what do you think? Should we start with the NASCAR video?
Well, before we start with NASCAR, I went and got gas this morning and had my GoPro on. So maybe we can show that quick video
Great.
of me.
Let's do that, Jennifer. Let's do that. Yeah. Here's Jennifer getting gas in the morning. Let's see. And here we go. We're going to play a video. Now, the video is going to play through your speakers. And so you may want to turn your speakers down. It's going to be a loud video. short but loud. So turn those speakers down a little bit, and here we go.
Okay.
All right, just like that. That was Jennifer, and that's how she always gets the very best parking spots here.
Yeah.
Nice job, Jennifer.
Hey, no problem.
Okay.
I got 2 tires changed as well.
Yeah.
Well,
So during that time, she filled up the gas tank, or someone filled up the gas tank and had 2 tires changed. All right. So in all honesty, that was a pit crew, as you well know. Jennifer is not a professional NASCAR driver. Yet. Don't give up on your dreams, Jennifer. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. So before we come back to NASCAR, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of other people. On your left, you see a man whose name is Justo Thomas. Now, Justo works at a very famous restaurant in New York City. It's called Le Benedrin. And Justo, for a living, he is a fish filleter. Now, you probably don't know him, but in culinary circles, he's actually kind of a celebrity. And the reason is that Justo can fillet 1,000 pounds of fish every day, right? A huge amount of fish. So when Justo takes a day off, his boss has to call in 3 other individuals to take his place. So here's the point that we're trying to make. Your top performers produce more for you. It's good to know who they are and know how to leverage them. Okay, now the next person needs no introduction. This is Serena Williams. And Serena is obviously a professional tennis player. She has been the only individual to have won six singles tournaments in Grand Slam, singles titles in Grand Slam tournaments. So very accomplished. She makes a lot of money, more than Jennifer and I, most likely, I'd have to guess.
Sure.
So to put that in context, there are about 5,000 female professional tennis players in the world. Only about half of them have ever earned a dime. And so, again, your top performers can really produce a lot for you. Now, back to our NASCAR example. Over on the right-hand side, you see Kyle Busch's pit crew. And Kyle Busch's pit crew was looked at as being the #1 pit crew for a time. Not the case now, but we have some good data around them. These 6 people on this pit crew were each top performers. Now, when you replace one of those top performers with an average performer, the time that it takes for a pit stop doubles. So it goes from 12 seconds to 24 seconds. If you replace 2 of those average performers, or 2 of those top performers with average performers, well, then the time goes from 12 seconds to 30 seconds. So again, the point that we try to make is that you can do more with your top performers. In an organization, it's really important to know who your top performers are. We talked about knowing who your top performers are and correlating that with performance and engagement levels, right? It's important to understand. Another reason it's important to understand your top performers is so that you can replicate their success. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about that. And some of you work at financial institutions. And I think that I've just spoiled it by clicking through on the slide. So you're going to be able to see everything on this slide. Let me help make sense of it. There was a financial institution that had the same hiring practices for their salespeople, major financial institution. They always did the same thing. That first they went out and they went to the very best colleges. They found the individuals that were at the top of their class. And lastly, they just made sure they had impeccable references. Okay, that's the process they always followed. But what they found was that there was a really diverse set of results from their hiring practices. So some of the people they hired were great and some really struggled. They looked at their top performers and found that their top performers had 3 things in common. First, they had typo-free resumes. Very interesting. Second, they had they had experience being able of selling real estate or automotive, so these big ticket items. And lastly, they did have a college degree. And where the degree was from, it really didn't make a difference. It could be from any place and any degree, and they didn't necessarily have to be the top of their class. So they had a choice. They could either rely on the data that they found from their research about their top performers, or they could keep doing what they've always done. They decided to hire based on these 3 new criteria, and within 6 months, they had earned an additional $4 million in revenue. So it just goes back to understanding your top performers and making sure that you are that you're cueing in to what their needs are, what makes them successful. And Jennifer's going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Exactly. So how do you find them, right? Top performers are really important. We just identified that you can do more with less. You can do more when you have a number of top performers, and you won't need as many individuals. But how do you go about finding them? Well, you want to put together a workforce strategy. And in order to do that, the first place that you always want to start is you want to make sure that that workforce strategy or that talent strategy, it aligns to your business strategy. You can have a great business strategy, but if you don't have the right people to drive it home or to execute on it, then you ultimately will not be successful, right? So the second place that you want to start is you want to look at your organization and differentiate your roles by type. And there's 3 types of roles in every organization. You have a mission critical role, you have a core role, which is basically your sales and marketing positions, and that's probably about probably about 20 to 25% of your organization. And then you have your foundation roles. I also want to clarify that no role identified is any more important than another role. You want to be able to differentiate these roles because you want to laser focus in on the roles that are most essential in terms of executing on the business strategy. And you want your very best talent in these roles. So how do you figure out what a mission critical role is in your organization? Let's take an example and look at Disney. So if you're in Michigan right now, Disney, whether it's in Florida or California, it sounds fabulous.
Sounds great.
Yeah, because it's spring here and it's, 30 degrees?
Yeah, about 30.
Yeah. So think about Disney. Think about sunny California or sunny Florida. And when you walk into Disney, you're expecting them to execute on their mission, which is provide me with a magical experience. And the individuals that are able to execute on that strategy are your street sweepers, are the people that greet you, and more importantly, those characters, right? The characters that you see in Disney, those would be your mission critical roles. They're the ones that are so closely related to executing on that business strategy. They're the most essential. Not more important, just most essential. Starbucks, similar. When you walk into a Starbucks, who are the individuals that are most essential in executing their business strategy? It's the barista. The barista that spells your name wrong on the cup. So my name is Jen, and I get a cup that says C-H-I-N, Chin. Yes, that's me. That's me, Chin, that ordered the white mocha, right? So it would definitely be your baristas. The next place is once you differentiate your roles, get your data out. We're going to talk a lot about data. We keep talking about it. And this is a time investment. But you have this data. It's just putting it all together and identifying the right data in order to identify who those top performers are. We have data in performance management systems. We have data in HRIS systems, maybe in your recruiting systems. Maybe you even did assessments in terms of when you recruited or onboarded your newest associates. Use that data. And we'll look at an example of really how to put this together on the next slide. But once you've identified who those top performers are, after getting all your data together, you want to make sure that you let them know. Let your top performers know that they are in fact a top performer and let them know why. However you identified or however you benchmark those top performers, make sure those top performers know. It does you no good to have that information but not tell anybody about it, right? And once you've identified them, once you've communicated this out to those individuals are going to want to know, all right, I'm a top performer, what's next? What's next for me? They need a guidepost. Go back to their goals. Go back to your performance metrics. Are those truly going to engage those top performers in the things that matter most? Review their talents and interests. Does it fit into continuing to engage them and move the organization forward? And does their compensation align with their performance? So let's take a quick look at an example of how you can start to profile those top performers within your organization. We've got Sarah Willis. She's a barista. Her core competencies and experience are her customer service and communication. Some benchmark skills that make her successful. She's very creative, completely organized. She can multitask like crazy. She's an excellent team builder, right? Her goals assigned customer service, definitely a great goal. Inventory management, probably a strong goal if you're in the retail division. Attendance. And then we have another area for comp ratio. We'll talk more about comp ratio, but that communicates to both Sarah and an organization where she is in her salary grade. We've got her performance score and how engaged she is. If you look at this holistically, you can identify any areas that may be a red flag, that may not be engaging Sarah in the things that matter most. I go back to goals. Those other two goals, customer service and inventory, they can make sense to me. But when you're talking about a top performer and how to keep them motivated and how to align goals to business strategies, attendance isn't going to do it. If that were me, I know every day it's a basic expectation. Attendance isn't something that's going to keep me engaged in the things that matter most. So this is why you want to identify what those items are, what the performance metrics are, what the goals are, so that you can reassess those and then assign those out so that they're motivating your top performers, right? All right, so we've identified and modeled our top performers. But how do we keep those top performers engaged? So if you think about compensation, it's one of the #1 culture definers for organizations, and it's time to make some tough decisions or choices about how we want to prioritize pay. So we've got another video. We're going to go to that.
I'm so excited to share with you, this guy has to be up for Boss of the Year. You know, with the pay gap between chief executives and the average workers expanding rapidly, this man is doing something drastically different. He's taking a pay cut to give his employees big raises. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has our story.
Imagine walking into work and finding out you and your colleagues will be doubling your pay, while your boss takes a pay cut.
We're going to have a minimum $70,000 pay rate for everyone that works here.
That's exactly what happened to the employees at Gravity Payments when Dan Price, the CEO, decided everyone at the company, no matter their position, would earn a minimum of $70,000 a year. Price was troubled by the pay gap. In the United States, one of the world's largest, with chief executives earning nearly 300 times what the average worker makes. So he cut his own salary from nearly $1 million to $70,000.
There's actually a Princeton study, and they said what level of income actually generates happiness, and they determined that it's actually around $70,000.
The study showed that for people who earn less than $70,000, extra money can make a big difference in their lives. For Alyssa O'Neill, a single mother, the extra money in her paycheck means more time to spend with family.
It's going to be exciting. His first time, he loves Mickey, so yeah, we're going to Disneyland, I think.
Out of 120 employees, 70 will get raises, with 30 doubling their salaries.
I think the thing that holds people back is a lack of independence. I think it's up to each of us to decide what's right for us and what we want to do.
Now, in addition to that pay cut, Dan Price is also using company profits to pay for the raises. That can be risky, but he says he is confident that his employees have more than earned it and they will continue to. And not surprisingly, guys, since this announcement, they're getting thousands of new job applicants. Everybody wants to work there. I wonder why. Exactly.
No, but keeps them motivated, I would imagine, more productive.
He feels like they're going to work harder because of this, and he's not worried in the slightest.
Excited to see what the outcome is.
We sure are. Rebecca, thanks.
So how do you keep those employees in the things that matter most? Give them all $70,000.
That's it. That's,
right?
that's our recommendation.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
End
Thanks
of
for-
presentation.
Again.
So,
No.
yes, we're not recommending that. I know Isaac wants to promote that, but I've talked him off the ledge, and I'm going to talk about, why we really have this video. So
Yeah.
it's definitely an innovative pay practice that Dan Price implemented at his organization. However, it's not something we recommend, right? Because a lot of things could happen when you give everybody or you raise everybody's pay to one level. Dan had a lot of fallout. He had top performers leave because he felt that the top performers, or those top performers felt that, hey, why is everybody else getting paid the same amount that I am when I'm an identified top performer? It doesn't make sense. However, if you check back in with this organization, you would think that it would just flop and not be doing well. However, the organization is doing very well right now. Again, not something we recommend, but why we liked this video, or why we liked this idea, is the why behind why he did this. When Dan Price talked to his employees, there was a lot of feedback that his employees had a lot of difficulty surviving, day to day in terms of finances. And what happened is when they come to work, they were distracted. So pay became a distraction in those employees being successful, in those employees helping his organization be successful. So in order to eliminate that pay distraction, his idea was give everybody $70,000. Again, not what we're recommending, but how can you take a step back and eliminate pay distractions within your organization? There was a Ceridian 2017 Pulse of Talent report. And when they took a deep dive into why top or high performers quit their job, what they found in their research is that the top 5 reasons employees are looking to leave are listed on your screen, with the number 1 being a non-competitive salary. Again, this is why their top performers or their high performers were leaving. So if your number 1 reason people are losing talent is because that they felt that pay was a distraction or that their pay wasn't competitive, then pay is important, and we need to take a step back and we need to look at ways on how we can eliminate that distraction. So how do you know if your top performers are leaving for a competitive salary? That's a difficult thing to find out. A lot of us probably already do exit interviews, and what we've noticed is that if you have top performers that are leaving your organization, we identified that top performers don't want to burn bridges. They know how important maintaining relationships are, right? So if they're leaving an organization, they probably identified that their number 1 reason for leaving is for a new career opportunity. We suggest adding a follow-up question to that. Add a follow-up question that says something like, what percentage of an increase are you getting to your salary with your new position? If you identify that they're moving to another organization and doing a similar role, but getting a significant increase, then maybe there's something going on with compensation in your organization. Maybe pay is a distraction in your organization. And once you have that, you then have data again, right? Because it's very difficult to go to your CEO and go, you know what, pay is a distraction in our organization. His first question is going to be, prove it. So you need to have some data to be able to justify why you need to take some steps in addressing pay or compensation. Let's do a real quick survey again. And let's ask ourselves, how competitive do you feel the pay is at your organization? Is pay too high? And if it is, let me know because I'd like to apply for a position. B, is it just right? Is pay too low? Or D, I'm not sure, but gosh, I wish I knew. So take a moment and go ahead and answer that survey for us.
Now, Jennifer, if somebody really does say we pay too high, I hope that you will stay here with us.
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the results as they come in, and no need to send me a link to your application.
So far the results are looking pretty typical to what we normally see. Actually, you know, I'm interested in this too low phenomenon. What do you think, Jennifer? Should we close it up?
Yeah, let's close it up.
Okay, so we've got 71% of the people saying that the pay is not competitive. I would love to find out why they feel that is, why they feel that's the case. Maybe you'll type something into that participant feedback section, and we may be able to see that and then speak to it. So about 18% say it's just right, and the remainder say not sure but wish you knew. And that's really typical, I'd say. Would you agree with that, Jennifer? I
would agree. And for those that think it's too low, just a follow-up question, and again, you may want to type that in the Q&A, but would your CEO agree if we asked him the same question? So I'd be interested to see what you think his answer would be.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Oftentimes when we ask that in front of a live group, there's a little bit of conversation around that. And almost all the time we say, does your CEO agree with you? And people kind of shake their head or smirk or laugh for a second there as if, no, there's not agreement on that. And so one of the big things with understanding compensation is knowing that it's not just about the numbers. It really is in part about messaging and being on the same page with the C-suite. So we're going to talk just for a couple of minutes about that. And our hope is that we'll give you a few tools and a little bit of vocab that you can use as you are having those compensation conversations with the C-suite and other leaders of your organization. Now, Jennifer pointed out that the number one reason that top performers leave is that their pay is not competitive. So there's another survey that shows something kind of similar. It talks about, and you see it up there on your slide, you see the number one reason that employees stay is because their pay is competitive. Now, hiring is getting more and more competitive. It is going to continue to get more and more competitive. And so it's important to know that compensation plays a big role in helping you to attract and retain employees. Okay? So we're going to talk just about a couple of things here, a couple of compensation topics. One of those topics is this idea of a compensation philosophy or a compensation strategy. What that is it's kind of a structure that an organization creates that talks about how employees will be compensated. And sometimes they share the compensation philosophy with employees, sometimes they don't. Some organizations want to be more transparent, some want to be less transparent. There's not a right or wrong answer. It really comes down to what's your culture and what do you want your culture to become. And so the compensation philosophy might say something to the effect of, we start all of our employees at a 85 or a 90% comp ratio. If somebody goes up over 120% of a comp ratio, or their comp ratio goes up to 120%, you know, at that point we won't give increases anymore, but we'll do a lump sum payment. And so this compensation philosophy, what it does is it creates the structure, but with that structure, you still have flexibility to make independent decisions. But that structure really helps to hold things in place. Then you won't see a lot of discrepancies in your hiring practices or in your compensation practices. So we invite you to think in terms of a compensation philosophy. Now, there are a number of different places where you can get data about what you should be paying. And we're going to talk about a few of them. You're going to see them over on your right-hand side. Our favorite is in the middle. But let's talk about crowdsourced data. It's very likely that you have had someone walk into your office and say, I'd like an increase. I was on such and such website, and I found that I should be paid X amount of money. So what that data is when you go on these websites that are available, that data is what we call crowdsourced data. That means that someone like Jennifer goes onto a website and says, I am a nurse practitioner and I make $400,000 a year, right? Whatever the number is. And so what it does is it relies on the accuracy of individuals, and there aren't really checks and balances in it. So what we advise is that you try to stay away from crowdsourced data. You'll also probably want to craft a response and know that when your employees come to you with that type of crowdsourced data, know that you can talk to them in those terms, that is crowdsourced data, which is far, far less accurate. And so you want to say that in a sensitive way. Now, the other alternative are these wonderful salary surveys that are out there. So we see a lot of organizations that choose to use one salary survey or maybe two. What we advocate for is multiple salary surveys. And there's technology that can help facilitate that. And so just know that when you have multiple salary surveys, what you're doing is you're removing biases from each of these surveys, and you're also getting enough data to be able to make good decisions about things. And so keep that in mind. So speaking of technology, I mentioned that technology can make this a little bit easier. So technology is really changing the landscape. One thing that it's doing is it is making it easier to gather accurate salary data. So there are platforms in which you can receive salary data without having to participate in the surveys. That's often one of the more difficult things that clients need to do. The other thing is that these applications that are available allow you to have really immediate access to insights. And so a lot of the analytics side of things is being done for you. And oftentimes this can be done in a really visual way to teach you more about what's going on and help you to discover trends that you may not otherwise see. Well, and also keep in mind that the employees who have access to the data they have is less accurate. And so it's just important to kind of keep that in the back of your mind when they do come and ask you for changes to their salary. Now, this slide is going to teach you one word, compa ratio. Some of you may be familiar with this. All of you are already familiar with the concept, though. A compa ratio is a very simple number. A compa ratio simply tells you where in the salary grade an employee's pay falls. So, for example, on the screen we have Emily, and Emily makes $31,500 a year. Her midpoint is $35,000 a year. So when you divide those two numbers, you come up with a 90% compa ratio. So this is a very simple number, but it's really powerful in that it allows you to see exactly where in the salary range someone falls. So if somebody has a really low compa ratio, an 80% or a 70%, somewhere in there, you have to know that you are at risk of losing that employee. Okay? On the high side of things, if somebody has 125% compa ratio, that's a really high compa ratio. Most of the time, compa ratios are going to stay right between 80 and 120%. But if you have too high compa ratios, know that you're spending more money than you actually need to. Okay? Now, just to kind of round that conversation out, I'm going to talk a little bit about this performance management process that organizations go through. So at the end of the year, a lot of organizations will complete a formal review, and they'll use that to calculate increases for the next year. So here's a little bit of math. What do you get when you take a non-competitive salary and add an annual increase of 3% to it? Well, you still get a non-competitive salary because the non-competitive salary hasn't changed, but the marketplace has, right? And so it's important to know that in order to have a successful performance management process, you have to start with a solid compensation process. You need to have competitive salaries. And again, there are applications that help to make that happen. So, Jennifer, we'll turn it over to you to wrap things up.
Absolutely. So in terms of enriching that employee experience or winning that war on talent, you want to make sure, again, make sure you develop those top performers. Have tools in place, get the data that you need, and make sure that you're working with your managers so that they can coach the employees to ensure accountability and they can ensure success. The next thing you want to do, again, is who are these people? Who are the top performers in your organization? We all probably have an idea, right? But get the data that you need so that you can build a benchmark. That benchmark can be used internally, but most of all, you can use that benchmark for when you're recruiting for positions, when you're looking for similar types of talent. Use your data. Let the employees know that they're a top performer, and make sure that you get that guidepost going so they know what's next, what's in it for me. Why should I continue with this organization? And then make sure that you're engaging your top performers. We all know, we've all heard different webinars of different ways to engage top performers, but when it comes to compensation, identify if your pay is competitive. Is it a distraction within your organization? Make sure you have that comp strategy or that comp philosophy. And if you get a copy of these slides, on the previous slide, there's a checklist on how to get started with that as well. And then make sure you have the right tools and partners in place so that you can actually drive that strategy, okay? I want to thank everybody that was on the line today and listened to us and sat through my amazing hair.
It was, this picture, you have great hair in that picture, Jennifer. Nice job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying nice as opposed to. It works. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Isaac. This is